everyone! I'm here. Yeah, so today is gonna be a reading stream again. And today's the goal is to read 4 chapters of Alice in Wonderland. It's a total of 12 chapters if anyone has a book or a free copy of it. There are free copies online. I think the most popular version is the Gutenberg. I think that's called. If you look up Alice in Wonderland Gutenberg, I think it shows up. Yeah, and let's see. Yeah, so we're from chapter 5. Our goal is to read chapter 5 to 8. Yeah, I was like trying to count in my mind. Let's see. Yeah, so today's just supposed to be a relaxing stream like again. It's gonna be a relatively short stream as well, around an hour. Or a little past an hour like last time. Wow, wait, fix my microphone. Okay, we're good. It was just tangled in its wires. So yeah, so far my day is fine. It's still morning, so yeah. I just finished class, and came back home. So yeah, we're good to go. Bum 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 bum. Dun 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 dun. Should I do another text? See, alright, chapter 5 on top. Just so people know where we are. Why do they always have to be so big? Bum 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 bum. Guess I'll do this, like now reading chapter 5. Yeah, I'll make it darker though. Bum 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 bum. Oh, no, it did not change it. Here we go. Bum 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 bum. There we go. Hope the music isn't too loud. If it is, just let me know. So yeah, okay, so we'll start reading chapter 5. Chapter 5 is an introduce one of the kind of characters from the film, the caterpillar. So let's start. Chapter 5, Advice from a Caterpillar. The caterpillar and Alice looked at each other for some time in silence. At last, the caterpillar took the hookah out of its mouth and addressed her in a languid, sleepy voice. "Who are you?" said the caterpillar. This was not an encouraging opening for a conversation. Alice replied, rather shyly, I hardly know, sir. Just at present, at least, I know who I was when I got up this morning. But I think I must have been changed several times since then." "What do you mean by that?" said the caterpillar sternly. "Explain yourself." "I can't explain myself, I'm afraid, sir," said Alice, "because I'm not myself, you see." "I don't see," said the caterpillar. "I'm afraid I can't put it more clearly," Alice replied very politely, "for I can't understand it myself to begin with, and being so many different sizes in a day is very confusing." "It isn't," said the caterpillar. "Well, perhaps you haven't found it so yet," said Alice. But when you have to turn into a chrysalis, you will someday, you know? And then after that, into a butterfly. I should think you'll feel a little queered, won't you?" "Not a bit," said the caterpillar. "Well, perhaps your feelings may be different," said Alice. "All I know is it would feel very queer to me." "You," said the caterpillar contemptuously. "Who are you?" Which brought them back again to the beginning of the conversation. Alice felt a little irritated at the caterpillars making such very short remarks, and she drew herself up and said, very gravely, "I think you ought to tell me who you are first." "Why?" said the caterpillar. Here was another puzzling question, and as Alice could not think of any good reason, as the caterpillar seemed to be in a very unpleasant state of mind, she turned away. "Come back," the caterpillar called after her. "I have something important to say." "This sounds promising." "Certainly." Alice turned and came back again. "Keep your temper," said the caterpillar. "Is that all?" said Alice, swallowing down her anger as well as she could. No, said the caterpillar. Alice thought she might as well wait, as she had nothing else to do, and perhaps, after all, it might tell her something worth hearing. For some minutes it puffed away, without speaking, but at last it unfolded its arms, took the hookah out of its mouth again, and said, So you think you're changed, do you? Wait, let me check something for a second. Okay, I turned off some effects, so it should be good. I realized I kind of had the echoing effect on my microphone. Hopefully I didn't have it on for the past many days. Alice thought, Hello, both of you guys. I'm currently doing a reading stream right now. It's nice to see you two. Yeah, today's just a reacting stream. As you can see above, I'm currently reading chapter 5. Let's see. Yeah, it's nice to see you guys. I hope you guys enjoy the relaxing stream today. Okay, so I'll continue. If you guys have anything else, if you guys will chat, I'll just respond after a paragraph. Alice thought she might as well wait, as she had nothing else to do, and perhaps, after all, it might tell her something worth hearing. For some minutes, it puffed away without speaking, but at last it unfolded its arms, took the hookah out of its mouth again, and said, So you think you're changed, do you? I am afraid I am, sir, said Alice. I can't remember things as... Where is the... I just saw that my internet connection is bad. I think it's back. Okay, we're back. Hopefully it doesn't keep doing that. Okay. In my youth, Father William replied to his son, I feared it might injure the brain, but now that I'm perfectly sure I have none, why, I do it again and again. You are old, said the youth, as I mentioned before, and you have grown most uncommonly fat, yet you turned a back somersault in the door. Pray, what is the reason of that? In my youth, said the sage as he shook his grey locks, I kept all my limbs very supple, but the use of this ointment, when shilling the box, allow me to sell you a couple? Don't mind me, just here to sleep to your stream. Yeah, no problem, a la carte. The stream is meant to be very, very relaxing and nice. If you fall asleep, you fall asleep. That's one reason why it's also an hour stream as well, it's just so people can kind of do stuff in the background or, you know, fall asleep or just relax. You are old, said the youth, and your jaws are too weak for anything tougher than sweat. Yet you finished the goose with the bones and the beak. Pray, how did you manage to do it? In my youth, said his father, I took to the law and argued each case with my wife, and the muscular strength which it gave to my jaw has lasted the rest of my life. You are old, said the youth. One would hardly suppose that your eyes were as steady as ever, that you balanced an eel on the end of your nose. What made you so awfully clever? I've answered 3 questions, and that is enough, said his father. Don't give yourself airs. Do you think I can listen all day to such stuff? Be off, or I'll kick you down the stairs. That is not said right, said the caterpillar. Not quite right, I'm afraid, said Alice timidly. Some of the words have got altered. It is wrong from beginning to end, said the caterpillar decidedly, and there was silence for some minutes. The caterpillar was the first to speak. What size do you want to be? It asked. Oh, I'm not particular as to size, Alice hastily replied. Only one doesn't like changing so often, you know. I don't know, said the caterpillar. Alice said nothing. She had never been so much contradicted in her life before, and she felt that she was losing her temper. Are you content now? Said the caterpillar. Well, I should like to be a little larger, sir, if you wouldn't mind, said Alice. 3 inches is such a wretched height to be. Okay, I just sneezed off screen. It is a very good height indeed, said the caterpillar angrily, rearing itself upright as it spoke. It was exactly 3 inches high. But I am not used to it, pleaded poor Alice in a piteous tone. As she thought of herself, I wish the creatures wouldn't be so easily offended. They'll get used to it in time, said the caterpillar, and put the hookah into its mouth and began smoking again. This time, Alice patiently waited until it chose to speak again. In a minute or two, the caterpillar took the hookah out of its mouth and yawned once or twice and shook itself. Then it got down off the mushroom and crawled away in the grass, merely remarking as it went, "One side will make you grow taller, and the other side will make you grow shorter." "One side of what? The other side of what?" thought Alice to herself. "Of the mushroom," said the caterpillar, just as if she had asked it out loud. In another moment, it was out of sight. Alice remained looking thoughtfully at the mushroom for a minute, trying to make out which were the two sides of it, and as it was perfectly round, she found this a very difficult question. However, at last, she stretched her arms round it as far as they would go, and broke off a bit of the edge with each hand. "And now, which is which?" she said to herself, and nibbled a little of the right-hand bit to try the effect. The next moment she felt a violent blow underneath her chin. It had struck her foot. She was a good deal frightened by this very sudden change, but she felt that there was no time to be lost, as she was shrinking rapidly. So she set to work at once to eat some of the other bit. Her chin was pressed so closely against her foot that there was hardly room to open her mouth, and she did it at last, and managed to swallow a morsel of the left-hand bit. "Come, my head's free at last," said Alice in a tone of delight, which changed into alarm in another moment when she found that her shoulders were nowhere to be found. All she could see when she looked down was an immense length of neck, which seemed to rise like a stalk out of a sea of green leaves that lay far below her. "What can all this green stuff be?" said Alice, "and where have my shoulders got to? And oh, my poor hands, how is it I can't see you?" She was moving them about as she spoke, but no result seemed to follow, except a little shaking among the distant green leaves. As there seemed to be no chance of getting her hands up to her head, she tried to get her head down to them, and was delighted to find that her neck would bend about easily in any direction, like a serpent. She had just succeeded in curving it down into a graceful zigzag, and was going to dive in among the leaves, which she found to be nothing but the tops of the trees under which she had been wandering, when a sharp hiss made her draw back in a fury. A large pigeon had flown into her face and was beating her violently with its wings. "Serpent!" cried the pigeon. "I am not a serpent," said Alice indignantly. "Let me alone." "Serpent, I say again," repeated the pigeon, but in a more subdued tone, and added with a kind of sob, "I tried every way, and nothing seems to suit them." "I haven't the least idea what you're talking about," said Alice. "I've tried the roots of trees, and I've tried banks, and I've tried hedges," the pigeon went on, without attending to her. "But those serpents, there's no pleasing them." Alice was more and more puzzled, but she thought that there was no use in saying anything more till the pigeon had finished. "As if it wasn't trouble enough to hatching the eggs," said the pigeon, "but I must be on the lookout for serpents night and day. Why, I haven't had a wink of sleep these 3 weeks. I'm very sorry you've been annoyed," said Alice, beginning to see its meaning. I'm And then just as I'd taken the highest tree in the wood," continued the pigeon, raising its voice to a shriek, "and just as I was thinking I should be free of them at last, they must need some wriggling down from the sky. Ah, serpents! But I'm not a serpent, I tell you," said Alice. I'm a... "Well, what are you?" said the pigeon. "I can see you're trying to invent something." I'm a little girl," said Alice, rather doubtfully, as she remembered the number of changes she had gone through that day. "A likely story indeed," said the pigeon in a tone of the deepest content. "I've seen a good many little girls in my time, but never one with such a neck as that. No, you're a serpent, and there's no use denying it. I suppose you'll be telling me next that you've never tasted an egg." "I have tasted eggs, certainly," said Alice, who was a very truthful child. "But little girls eat eggs quite as much as serpents do, you know." "I don't believe it," said the pigeon. "But if they do, why then they're a kind of serpent. That's all I can say." This was such a new idea to Alice that she was quite silent for a minute or two, which gave the pigeon the opportunity of adding, "Looking for eggs, I know that well enough. And what does it matter to me whether you're a little girl or a serpent?" "It matters a good deal to me," said Alice hastily, "but I'm not looking for raw eggs. As it happens, and if I was, I shouldn't want yours. I don't like them raw. We'll be off then, said the pigeon in a sulky tone. As it settled down again into its nest, Alice crouched down among the trees as well as she could, for her neck kept getting entangled among the branches, and every now and then she had to stop and untwist it. After a while, she remembered that she still held the pieces of mushrooms in her hands, and she set to work very carefully, nibbling first at one and then at the other, and growing sometimes larger and sometimes shorter, until she had succeeded in bringing herself down to her usual height. It was so long since she had been anything near the right size that it felt quite strange at first, but she got used to it in a few minutes, and began talking to herself as usual. Come, there's half my plan done now. How puzzling all these changes are. I'm never sure what I'm going to be from one minute to another. However, I've got back to my right size. The next thing is to get into that beautiful garden. How is that to be done, I wonder? As she said this, she came suddenly upon an open place with a little house in it about 4 feet high. Whoever lives there, thought Alice, it'll never do to come upon them this size. Why, I should frighten them out of their wits. She began nibbling at the right-hand bit again, and did not venture to go near the house till she had brought herself down to 9 inches high. Yep, and now we're done with chapter 5. Yeah, so that was a chapter of the caterpillar. As you can see, it goes basically similar to that movie, where, she talks to the caterpillar, questions her, she doesn't quite know, and stuff, and then it tells her about the mushroom size. Yep. And talking about Alice in Wonderland, it does kind of remind me of, wait, let me look up what this movie is called. Is it called just Alice in Wonderland? I don't remember. It's the one that's directed by Tim Burton. Yeah. Honestly, for me, that movie is just okay. I don't particularly like it, but I don't particularly dislike it, I guess. I don't know. It's kind of hard for me to talk about or think about that one. And then just the point of view, because I just like how crazy the original book is. I don't really like the fact that it had a plot and everything. Yeah. I'm not saying it's like bad, I guess, or whatever, but I mean, I know there's a sequel to it, but I did not read the sequel to it. Watch the sequel to it. And because I'm just like, I don't think I really want or need the sequel, since I just thought the first book was just okay. Yeah, so we'll be walking into chapter 6 soon. Chapter 6 is called Pig and Pepper, by the way. Let's introduce a character that I don't think actually appears in the Disney movie. It's the Duchess, I believe that's her name. And this footman. Yeah. I think the Cheshire Cat, I think, appears in this part as well. I don't remember if he appears in the later part of the book. Like I said, I haven't read this in like, I think 10 years now, so yeah, it's been a really long time since I read classic books. So yeah, let me just change the text on top. As we're reading chapter 6 now. Boom, boom, boom. There you go. Okay, so now we'll continue on. So chapter 6, title is Pig and Pepper. For a minute or two, she stood looking at the house and wondering what to do next, when suddenly a footman in livery came running out of the wood. She considered him to be a footman because he was in livery. Otherwise, judging by his face only, she would have called him a fish, and rapped loudly at the door with his knuckles. It was opened by another footman in livery, with a round face and large eyes like a frog, and both footmen, Alice noticed, had powdered hair that curled all the way over their heads. She had felt very curious to know what it was all about, and crept a little way out of the woods to listen. The fish footman began by producing from under his arm a great letter, nearly as large as himself, and he handed it over to the other, saying in a solemn tone, "For the Duchess, an invitation from the Queen to play croquet." Or is it croquet? The frog footman repeated the same solemn tone, only changing the order of the words a little. From the Queen, an invitation from the Duchess to play croquet. I'll just say it's croquet. The Then they both bowed low, and the curls got entangled together. Alice laughed so much at this that she had to run back into the wood for fear of their hearing her. And when she next peeped out, the fish footman was gone, and the other one was sitting on the ground near the door, staring stupidly up into the sky. Alice went timidly up to the door and knocked. "There's no sort of use in knocking," said the footman, and for two reasons. First, because I'm on the same side of the door as you are. Secondly, because they're making such a noise inside, no one could possibly hear you. And certainly there was a most extraordinary sound going on within, a constant howling and sneezing, and every now and then a great crash, as if a dish or kettle had been broken to pieces. "Please then," said Alice, "how am I to get in?" "There might be some sense in your knocking," the footman went on without attending to her. "If we had the door between us, for instance, if you were inside, you might knock. I could let you out, you know." He was looking up into the sky all the time he was speaking, and this Alice thought decidedly uncivil. "But perhaps he can't help it," she said to herself. "His eyes are so very near at the top of his head. But at any rate, he might answer questions. How am I to get in?" she repeated aloud. "I shall sit here," the footman remarked, "till tomorrow." At this moment, the door of the house opened, and a large plate came skimming out, straight at the footman's head. It just grazed his nose, and broke to pieces against one of the trees behind him. "Or next day, maybe," the footman continued in the same tone, exactly as if nothing had happened. "How am I to get in?" asked Alice in a louder tone. "Are you to get in at all?" said the footman. "That's the first question, you know." It was, no doubt, only Alice did not like to be told so. "It's really dreadful," she muttered to herself. "The way all the creatures argue is enough to drive one crazy." The footman seemed to think this a good opportunity for repeating his remark with variations. "I shall sit here," he said, "on and off for days and days." Dun, dun, dun. Oops, lost my place. Okay. "But what am I to do?" said Alice. "Anything you like," said the footman, and began whistling. "Oh, there's no use in talking to him," said Alice desperately. "He's perfectly idiotic." And she opened the door and went in. The door led right into a large kitchen, which was full of smoke from one end to the other. The Duchess was sitting on a three-legged stool in the middle nursing a baby. The cook was leaning over the fire, stirring a large cauldron which seemed to be full of soup. "There's certainly too much pepper in that soup," Alice said to herself, as well as she could for sneezing. There was certainly too much of it in the air. Even the Duchess sneezed occasionally. And as for the baby, it was sneezing and howling alternately without a moment's pause. The only thing in the kitchen that did not sneeze were the cook, and a large cat which was sitting on the hearth and grinning from ear to ear. "Please, would you tell me," said Alice a little timidly, for she was not quite sure whether it was good manners for her to speak first, "why your cat grins like that?" "It's a Cheshire cat," said the Duchess, "and that's why. Pig." She said the last word with such sudden violence that Alice quite jumped. But then she saw in another moment that it was addressed to the baby, and not to her, so she took courage and went on again. "I didn't know that Cheshire cats always grinned. In fact, I didn't know that cats could grin." "They all can't," said the Duchess, "and most of them do." "I didn't know any of that do," Alice said very politely, feeling quite pleased to have gotten into a conversation. "You don't know much," said the Duchess, "and that's a fact." Alice did not at all like the tone of this remark, and thought it would be as well to introduce some other subject of conversation. While she was trying to fix on one, the cook took the cauldron of soup off the fire, and at once set to work, throwing everything within her reach at the Duchess and the baby. The fire irons came first, then followed a shower of saucepans, plates, and dishes. The Duchess took no notice of them even when they hit her. The baby was howling so much already that it was quite impossible to say whether the blows hurt it or not. "Oh, please mind what you're doing," cried Alice, jumping up and down in an agony of terror. "Oh, there goes his precious nose!" And as an unusually large saucepan flew close by it and very nearly carried it off. "If everybody minded their own business," the Duchess said in a hoarse growl, "the world would go round a deal faster than it does, which would not be an advantage," said Alice, who felt very glad to get an opportunity of showing off a little of her knowledge. "Just think of what work it would make with a day and night. You see, the Earth takes 24 hours to turn round on its axis. Talking of axes, said the Duchess, top of her head. Alice glanced rather anxiously at the cook to see if she meant to take the hit. But the cook was busily stirring the soup and seemed not to be listening, so she went on again. 24 hours, I think, or is it 12? Oh, don't bother me, said the Duchess. I never could avoid figures. With that, she began nursing her child again, singing a sort of lullaby to it as she did so, and giving a violent shake at the end of every line. Speak roughly to your little boy, and beat him when he sneezes. He only does it to annoy, because he knows it teases. Wow, wow, wow. While the Duchess sang the second verse of the song, she kept tossing the baby violently up and down, and the poor little thing howled so that Alice could hardly hear the words. I speak severely to my boy, I beat him when he sneezes, for he can thoroughly enjoy the pepper when he pleases. Wow, wow, wow. Here, you may nurse it a bit if you like, the Duchess said to Alice, flinging the baby at her as she spoke. Must go and get ready to play croquet with the Queen. And she hurried out of the room. The cook threw a frying pan after her as she went out, but it just missed her. Alice caught the baby with some difficulty. It was a queer-shaped little creature, and held out its arms and legs in all directions, just like a starfish, thought Alice. The poor little thing was snorting like a steam engine when she caught it, and kept doubling itself up and straightening itself out again, so that altogether, the first minute or two, it was as much as she could do to hold it. As soon as she had made the proper way of nursing it, which was to twist it up into a sort of knot, and then keep tight hold of its right ear and left foot, so as to prevent its undoing itself, she carried it out into the open air. If I don't take the child away with me, thought Alice, they're sure to kill it in a day or two. Wouldn't it be murder to leave it behind? She said the last words out loud. Little thing grunted in reply. I had left off sneezing by this time. Don't grunt, said Alice. That's not at all a proper way of expressing yourself. The baby grunted again, and Alice looked very anxiously into his face to see what was the matter with it. There could be no doubt that it had a very turned-up nose, much more like a snout than a real nose, although its eyes were getting extremely small for a baby. Altogether, Alice did not like the look of the thing at all, but perhaps it was only sobbing, she thought, and looked in its eyes again to see if there were any tears. No, there was no tears. If you're going to turn into a pig, my dear, said Alice seriously, I'll have nothing more to do with you, mind now. The poor little thing stopped again, or grunted, it was impossible to say which, and they went on for some time while in a silence. Alice was just beginning to think to herself, now what am I to do with this creature when I get it home? And it grunted again so violently that she looked down into its face in some alarm. This time there could be no mistake about it. It was neither more nor less than a pig, and she felt that it would be quite absurd for her to carry it further. So she set the little creature down, and felt quite relieved to see it trot away quietly into the wood. If it had grown up, she said to herself, it would have made a dreadfully ugly child, but it made a rather handsome pig, I think. And she began thinking over other children she knew who might do very well as pigs, and was just saying to herself, if one only knew the right way to change them, when she was a little startled by seeing the Cheshire Cat sitting on a bough of a tree a few yards up. Yep, this chapter is where the Cheshire Cat comes out. It's called Pig and Pepper though, because it's supposed to have focused initially on the Duchess and the pig, or baby pig I guess. The cat only grinned when it saw Alice. It looked good-natured, she thought, still it had very long claws and a great many teeth, so she felt that it ought enough to be treated with respect. Cheshire Puss, she began rather timidly, as she did not all know whether it would like the name. However, it only grinned a little wider. Come, it's pleased so far, by Alice, as she went on. Would you please tell me which way I ought to go from here? That depends a good deal on where you want to get to, said the cat. I don't much care where, said Alice. Then it doesn't matter which way you go, said the cat. As long as I get somewhere, Alice added, as an explanation. Oh, you're sure to do that, said the cat, if you only walk long enough. Alice felt that this could not be denied, so she tried another question. What sort of people live about here? In that direction, the cat said, waving its right paw around, lives a hatter. In that direction, waving the other paw, lives a March hare. Visit either you like, they're both mad. But I don't want to go among mad people, Alice remarked. "Oh, you can't help that," said the cat. "We're all mad here. I'm mad. You're mad." "How do you know I'm mad?" said Alice. "You must be," said the cat, "or you wouldn't have come here." Alice didn't think that it proved it at all. However, she went on. "And how do you know that you're mad?" "To begin with," said the cat, "a dog's not mad, you grant that?" "I suppose so," said Alice. "Well then," the cat went on, "you see, a dog growls when it's angry and wags its tail when it's pleased. Now I growl when I'm pleased and wag my tail when I'm angry. Therefore, I'm mad." "I call it purring, not growling," said Alice. "Call it what you like," said the cat. "Do you play croquet with the queen today?" "I should like it very much," said Alice, "but I haven't been invited yet." "You'll see me there," said the cat, and vanished. Alice was not much surprised at this, as she was getting so used to queer things happening. While she was looking at the place where it had been, it suddenly appeared again. "By the by, what became of the baby?" said the cat. "I'd nearly forgotten to ask." "It turned into a pig," Alice said quietly, just as if it had come back in a natural way. "I thought it would," said the cat, and vanished again. Alice waited a little, half expecting to see it again, but it did not appear, and after a minute or two, she walked on in the direction in which the March Hare was said to live. "I've seen hatters before," she said to herself. "The March Hare will be much the most interesting, and perhaps as this is May, it won't be raving mad, at least not so mad as it was in March." As she said this, she looked up, and there was a cat again, sitting on a branch of a tree. "Did you say pig or fig?" said the cat. "I said pig," replied Alice. "And I wish you wouldn't keep appearing and vanishing so suddenly. You make one quite giddy." "All right," said the cat, and this time it vanished quite slowly, beginning with the end of the tail and ending with the grin, which remained some time after the rest of it had gone. "Well, I have often seen a cat without a grin," thought Alice, "but a grin without a cat is the most curious thing I ever saw in my life." She had not gone much farther before she came into sight of the house of the March Hare. She thought it must be the right house, because the chimneys were shaped like ears, and the roof was thatched with fur. It was so large a house that she did not like to go near till she had nibbled some more of the left-hand bit of mushroom, and raised herself to about 2 feet high. Even then, she walked up towards it rather timidly, saying to herself, "I suppose I should be raving mad after all. I almost wish I'd gone to see the Hatter instead." And that is the end of chapter 7. We only have 2 chapters left for today. We're halfway there. Yeah, so let's see. Yeah, so we actually met the Cheshire Cat. Yeah, the Cheshire Cat will appear later back in the novel during the Queen's Team Party. Spoiler, I guess. But yeah. Let's see. Yeah, so as you can see in the if anyone is familiar with the Disney movie, I guess, I think that's the version a lot of people are familiar with. Yeah, I'm pretty sure they didn't add in the Duchess, right? And the pig and the footman. I think they transitioned straight from the caterpillar to the cat. Yes, it's been a really long time since I've actually watched this novel, so yeah. Oh, whoops, that reminds me, I didn't tweet out the stream. I should do that. Go to that first. Bum 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 bum. As I'm talking. So yeah. At this point, we're technically halfway through the novel, actually, as well, since it only has 12 chapters. Yeah. This novel is relatively short, which is good for our first reading stream. I do want to do longer books later, but not at the moment. Bum bum bum. So yeah, let's see. Yeah, so what I'm planning to read after this is probably, let's see. It's gonna be, I think, oh yeah, like I said it earlier. It'll just be Korean folktales, essentially. By Korean folktales, I mean like the ones, or it's fairy tales, I guess. Maybe it makes more accurate, I don't know. But yeah. Bum, bum, bum. I have several books of it here in my family house, so my plan is to read through maybe 2 or 3 books maybe for a stream every now and then. I just will do it occasionally. I won't make it a continuous stream similar to Alice in Wonderland. I'll just do it every now and then, just so I don't run out of Korean folktale books. That is a problem. chapter 6. Yeah, and then the next chapter is gonna be about the Mad Tea Party. Yep, I'm pretty sure this is very iconic to people who watched Alice in Wonderland or read it or know any visuals about it. March Hare and the Mad Hatter. And the Dormouse as well. Bum bum bum. Okay, we're good. Yeah, I forgot to tweet. Whoops. We're good now. Let's see. What else? Before we start. Okay, well, first of all, I need to change the text. That's very important. Okay, let's do that. Bum 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 bum. I'm reading chapter 7. Bam. There we go. Let's see. Yeah, I can see the chat disconnected here on the side. Just ignore that. I haven't had any other internet issues actually so far, so we should be good. We should be good. Yep, so now I will continue with chapter 8. Not chapter 8, chapter 7. Mad Tea Party. Yep, so look forward to meeting the Dormouse, the March Hare, and the Hatter. Okay, let's go. Chapter 7. A Mad Tea Party. There was a table set out under a tree in front of the house, and the March Hare and the Hatter were having tea at it. Our Dormouse was sitting between them, fast asleep, and the other two were using it as a cushion, resting their elbows on it. Aw. It's cute. And talking over its head. Very uncomfortable for the Dormouse, thought Alice, only, as it is asleep, I suppose it doesn't mind. The table was a large one, but the three were all crowded together at one corner of it. No room, no room, they cried out when they saw Alice coming. There's plenty of room, said Alice, indignantly. She sat down in a large armchair at one end of the table. Have some wine, the March Hare said in an encouraging tone. Alice looked all around the table, but there was nothing on it but tea. I don't see any wine, she remarked. There isn't any, said the March Hare. Then it wasn't very civil of you to offer it, said Alice angrily. It wasn't very civil of you to sit down without being invited, said the March Hare. I didn't know it was your table, said Alice. It's laid for a great many more than 3. Your hair wants cutting, said the Hatter. He had been looking at Alice for some time with great curiosity, and this was his first speech. You should learn not to make personal remarks, Alice said with some severity. It's very rude. The Hatter opened his eyes very wide on hearing this, but all he said was, Why, is a raven like a writing desk? Come, we shall have some fun now, thought Alice. I'm glad they've begun asking riddles. I believe I can guess that, she added aloud. Do you mean that you think you can find out the answer to it, said the March Hare. Exactly so, said Alice. Then you should say what you mean, the March Hare went on. I do, Alice hastily replied. At least I mean what I say. That's the same thing, you know. Not the same thing a bit, said the Hatter. Might as well just say that I see what I eat is the same thing as I eat what I see. You might just as well say, added to the March Hare, that I like what I get is the same thing as I get what I like. You might just as well say, added the Dormouse, who seemed to be talking in its sleep, that I breathe when I sleep is the same thing as I sleep when I breathe. It is the same thing with you, said the Hatter, and here the conversation dropped, and the party sat silent for a minute, while Alice thought over all she could remember about ravens and writing desks, which wasn't much. The Hatter was the first to break the silence. What day of the month is it? He said, turning to Alice. He had taken his watch out of his pocket and was looking at it uneasily, shaking it every now and then, and holding it to his ear. Alice considered a little and then said, The 4th. 2 days wrong, sighed the Hatter. I told you butter wouldn't suit the works, he added, looking angrily at the March Hare. It was the best butter, the March Hare meekly replied. Yes, but some crumbs must have gotten in it as well, the Hatter grumbled. You shouldn't have put it in with the bread knife. The March Hare took the watch and looked at it gloomily. Then he dipped it into his cup of tea, looked at it again, but he could think of nothing better to say than his first remark. It was the best butter, you know. Alice had been looking over his shoulder with some curiosity. What a funny watch, she remarked. It tells the day of the month and doesn't tell what o'clock it is. Why should it, muttered the Hatter. Does your watch tell you what year it is? Of course not, Alice replied very readily. But that's because it stays the same year for such a long time together. Which is just the case with mine, said the Hatter. Alice felt dreadfully puzzled. The Hatter's remark seemed to have no sort of meaning in it, and yet it was certainly English. I don't quite understand you, she said as politely as she could. I just realized the OST fits right now. Alice felt dreadfully puzzled. The Hatter's remark seemed to have no sort of meaning in it, and yet it was certainly English. I don't quite understand you, she said, as politely as she could. The Dormouse is asleep again, said the Hatter, and he poured a little hot tea upon his nose. The Dormouse shook its head impatiently and said, without opening its eyes, Of course, just what I was going to remark myself. Have you guessed the riddle yet? The Hatter asked, turning to Alice again. No, I give up, Alice replied. What's the answer? I haven't the slightest idea, said the Hatter. Nor I, said the March Hare. Alice sighed wearily. I think you might do something better with the time, she said, than waste it in asking riddles that have no answers. If you knew time as well as I do, said the Hatter, you wouldn't talk about wasting it. It's him. I don't know what she means, said Alice. Of course you don't, the Hatter said, tossing his head contemptuously. I dare say you never even spoke to time. Perhaps not, Alice cautiously replied. But I know I have to beat time when I learn music. Oh, that accounts for it, said the Hatter. He won't stand beating. Now if you only kept on good terms with him, you'd do almost anything you'd like with the clock. For instance, suppose it were 9 o'clock in the morning. Just time to begin lessons. You'd only have to whisper a hint to time, and round goes the clock in a twinkling. 1:30, time for dinner. I only wish it was, the March Hare said to himself in a whisper. That would be grand, certainly, said Alice thoughtfully, but then I shouldn't be hungry for it, you know. Not at first, perhaps, said the Hatter. We could keep it to 1:30 as long as you liked. Is that the way you manage? Alice asked. The Hatter shook his head mournfully. Not I, he replied. We quarreled last month, just before he went mad, you know, pointing with his teaspoon at the March Hare. We had a great concert given by the Queen of Hearts, and I had to sing, Twinkle, twinkle, little bat, how I wonder where you're at. You know the song, perhaps? I've heard something like it, said Alice. It goes on, you know, the Hatter continued in this way. Up above the world you fly, like a tea tray in the sky. Twinkle, twinkle. Here the Dormouse shook itself and began singing it to itself. Twinkle, 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 twinkle. Went on so long that they had to pinch it to make it stop. Well, I'll hardly finish the first verse, said the Hatter. The Queen jumped and bawled out, He's murdering the time, off with his head. How dreadfully savage, explained Alice. And ever since that, the Hatter went on in a mournful tone, he won't do a thing I ask. It's always 6 o'clock now. A bright idea came into Alice's head. Is that the reason so many tea things are put out here? She asked. Yes, that's it, said the Hatter with a sigh. It's always tea time. If you no time to wash the things between whiles, then you keep moving around, I suppose, said Alice. Exactly so, said the Hatter, as the things get used up. What happens when you come to the beginning again? Alice ventured to ask. Suppose we change the subject, the March Hare interrupted, yawning. I'm getting tired of this. I vote the young lady tell us a story. I'm afraid I don't know one, said Alice, rather alarmed at her proposal. And the Dormouse shall, they both cried. Wake up, Dormouse. And they pitched it on both sides at once. The Dormouse slowly opened its eyes. I wasn't asleep, he said in a hoarse, feeble voice. I heard every word you fellows were saying. Tell us a story, said the March Hare. Yes, please do, pleaded Alice. And be quick about it, added the Hatter. We'll be asleep again before it's done. Once upon a time, there were 3 little sisters. The Dormouse began in a great hurry. Their names were Elsie, Lacey, and Tilly, and they lived at the bottom of a well. What did they live on? Said Alice, who always took great interest in questions of eating and drinking. They lived on a treacle, said the Dormouse after thinking a minute or two. They couldn't have done that, you know. Alice gently remarked they'd have been ill. So they were, said the Dormouse, very ill. Alice tried to fancy to herself what such extraordinary ways of living would be like, but it puzzled her too much, so she went on. But why did they live at the bottom of a well? Take some more tea, the March Hare said to Alice very earnestly. I've had nothing yet, Alice replied in an offended tone, so I can't take more. You mean you can't take less, said the Hatter. It's very easy to take more than nothing. Nobody asked your opinion, said Alice. Who's making her personal remarks now? Said the hamster, Alice triumphantly. Alice did not quite know what to say to this, so she helped herself to some tea and bread and butter. And then she turned to the Dormouse and repeated her question. Why did they live at the bottom of the well? Dormouse again took a minute or two to think about it and then said, It was a trickle well. There's no such thing. Alice was beginning very angrily, but the Hatter and the March Hare went, Shh, and the Dormouse sickly remarked, "If you can't be civil, you better finish the story for yourself." "No, please go on," Alice said very humbly. "I won't interrupt again. I dare say there may be one." "One indeed," said the Dormouse indignantly. However, he consented to go on. And so, these three little sisters, they were learning to draw, you know. What did they draw?" said Alice, quite forgetting her promise. "Treacle," said the Dormouse, without considering it all this time. "I want a clean cup," interrupted the Hatter. "Let's all move one place on." He moved on as he spoke. The Dormouse followed him. The March Hare moved into Dormouse's place, and Alice rather unwillingly took the place of the March Hare. The Hatter was the only one who got any advantage from the change. Alice was a good deal worse off than before, as the March Hare had just upset the milk jug into his plate. Alice did not wish to offend the Dormouse again, so she began very cautiously. "But I don't understand. Where did you draw the treacle from?" "You can draw water out of a water well," said the Hatter. "So I should think you could draw a treacle out of a treacle well, stupid." "But they weren't in the well," Alice said to the Dormouse, not choosing to notice this last remark. "Of course they were," said the Dormouse. "Well, in." The answer so confused poor Alice that she let the Dormouse go on for some time without interrupting it. Though learning to draw, the Dormouse went on, yawning and rubbing its eyes, for it was getting very sleepy, and they drew all manners of things. "Everything that begins with an M." "Why with an M?" said Alice. "Why not?" said the March Hare. Alice was silent. The Dormouse had closed its eyes by this time and was going off into a doze, but on being pinched by the Hatter, it woke up again with a little shriek, and went on. "That begins with an M, such as mousetraps, and the moon, and memory, and muchness, you know. You say things are much of a muchness. Did you ever see such a thing as a drawing of a muchness?" "Really? Now you're asking me," said Alice, very much confused. "I don't think—" "Then you shouldn't talk," said the Hatter. This piece of rudeness was way more than Alice could bear, but she got up in great disgust and walked off. The Dormouse fell asleep instantly, and neither of the others took the least notice of her going through, though she looked back once or twice, half hoping that they would call after her. Last time she saw them, they were trying to put the Dormouse into the teapot. "At any rate, I'll never go there again," said Alice as she picked her way through the wood. "It's the stupidest tea party I ever was in all of my life." Just as she said this, she noticed that one of the trees had a door leading right into it. "That's very curious," she thought. "But everything's curious today. I think I may as well go in at once." And in she went. Once more, she found herself in a long hall and close to the little glass table. "Now I'll manage better this time," she said to herself, and began by taking the little golden key and locking the door that led into the garden. Then she went to work nibbling at the mushroom. She had kept a piece of it in her pocket till she was about a foot high. Then she walked down the little passage, and then she found herself at last in the beautiful garden, among the bright flower beds and the cool fountains. And that was chapter 7, everyone. Yay! Yeah, I was just like... Yeah, so we're good now. Bum 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 bum. Let's see. We should change the OST actually. I realized that the last OST was actually not copyrighted, so we'll do our best to keep this VOD. I forgot I had autoplay on, so that is a problem. We'll do our best to keep the VOD. If it's copyright claimed, that's fine. As long as it's not copyright striked, I'm good. So yeah. Yeah, so that was chapter 7. Chapter 8 is called the Queen's Croquet Ground, by the way. So we're gonna meet the Queen in the next chapter. Isn't that exciting? That's basically what also we're gonna end off to afterwards. So yeah. Ouch. Anyway. So yeah, let's see. How much time do we have has happened? 1:34 around apparently? Okay, that's not bad actually. That's fine. I don't know why it says 1:34 to be honest. I don't think it's 1:34. Yeah, it says 51 minutes. I don't know why it says 1:34. I just want to go check on my phone. The time. Maybe sometimes it's not accurate. Maybe it's a glitch or something. It's probably a glitch or something. Anywho. Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, it's already on the last chapter for today. Yep. I wish I could stream these reading streams a little bit longer, but like I said, I do want to pace them out to be around the same length as each other. So yeah. So after this reading stream is over, there'll be one more reading stream of Alice in Wonderland, chapter 9 to 12, finishing everything off. After that, I'll be reading some Korean fairy tale, folktale stuff for my next reading stream. I don't know when the next reading stream will be in terms of after the Alice in Wonderland reading streams, because there's some stuff I want to do at certain parts of the year. So yeah. For example, I do want to do something for Valentine's Day. Not quite too sure what it'll be at this point. I am working on something right now in terms of like, let's just say I'll have a new look on Valentine's Day that I might be using for the rest of the week, maybe. Yeah. Besides that, I'm not quite too sure exactly what I'll be doing for the rest of the week. Oh yeah, that reminds me. Also, Holocure is coming out this week. I don't know if I'll be watching it this week though, to be honest. I might be not watching it, I mean playing it this week. I might be playing it probably next week, but I don't know what day it would be either. Either that or I might just do a really small stream on Saturday and stream myself playing that game. Otherwise, I think I would play it like one more time, I think. And then, I don't know if I'll keep playing it on screen though. Because I just don't want to, because we already have other game series going on right now, so I don't really want Holocure to be another series at this moment. That'd be a thing I would just play one off here and there. On that note, I have played it a little bit on my own time actually. I don't do much though with it, only because I did have another account, but it didn't carry over from my computer, so I did have to restart all over again. So I might play a little bit off screen actually before I stream it on potentially Saturday, but definitely sometime next week I think. I don't know when. I think I'll pause Hades and the Mario stream for that, so yeah. Anyway, now we're gonna read on to chapter 8. Let me just change the stuff. Bam. And bam. There we go, chapter 8. So yeah. We're gonna go move on to the next chapter now. Oh yeah. Before we move on to chapter 8, yeah. I will timestamp the chapters and the intermission parts as well if people just want to skip those parts in every single reading stream. So yeah. That is my goal. For some reason I can't embed the timestamps into the actual stream. I did look it up. I don't really know what's the issue. I followed what they said, but it's not working, so I don't know. I did hear from, I think it might be a removed feature for small channels, I don't know, but we'll see. The Exchange for Game community posted earlier, I guess, but yeah. Anyway, let's read chapter 8. So now. Let me just drink some water first. Okay, I'm drinking some water. Let's go read chapter 8. Chapter 8. The Queen's Croquet Ground. A large rose tree stood near the entrance of the garden. The roses growing on it were very white, but there were 3 gardeners at it, busily painting them red. Alice thought this was a very curious thing, and she went nearer to watch them, and just as she came up to them, she heard one of them say, "Look out now, Five. Don't go splashing paint over me like that." "I couldn't help it," said Five in a sulky tone. "Seven jogged my elbow." On which Seven looked up and said, "That's right, Five. Always lay the blame on others." "You'd better not talk," said Five. "I heard the Queen say only yesterday you deserved to be beheaded." "What for?" said the one who had spoken first. "That's none of your business too," said Seven. "Yes, it is his business," said Five. "And I'll tell him. It was for bringing the cooked tulips roots instead of onions." Seven flung down his brush and had just begun. Well, of all the unjust things, when his eyes chanced to fall upon Alice as she stood watching them, and he checked himself suddenly. The others looked around also, and all of them bowed low. "Would you tell me," said Alice a little timidly, "why you are painting those roses?" Five and Seven said nothing, but looked at Two. Two began in a low voice, "Why, the fact is, you see, miss, This here ought to have been a red rose tree. We put a white one in by mistake. And if the queen was to find it out, we should all have our heads cut off, you know. So you see, miss, we're doing our best before she comes to." At this moment, Five, who had been anxiously looking across the garden, called out, "The queen! The queen!" And the three gardeners instantly threw themselves flat upon their faces. There was a sound of many footsteps, and Alice looked round, eager to see the queen. First came 10 soldiers carrying clubs. These were all shaped like the three gardeners, oblong and flat, with their hands and feet at the corners. Next, the 10 courtiers. They were ornamental and all over with diamonds, and walked two and two, as the soldiers did. After these came the royal children. There were 10 of them, and the little dears came jumping merrily along, hand in hand, and in couples they were all ornamented with hearts. Next came the guests, mostly kings and queens, and among them Alice recognized a white rabbit, who was talking in a hurried, nervous manner, smiling at everything that was said, and went by without noticing her. Then followed the knave of hearts, carrying the king's crown on a crimson velvet cushion, and last of all this grand procession came the king and queen of hearts. Alice was rather doubtful whether she ought not to lie down on her face like the three gardeners, but she could not remember ever having heard of such a rule at processions. And besides, what would be the use of a procession, thought she, if people had all to lie down upon their faces, so that they couldn't see it? So she stood there, where she was, and waited. When the procession came opposite to Alice, they all stopped and looked at her. The queen said reservedly, "Who is this?" She said it to the knave of hearts, who only bowed and smiled in reply. "Idiot," said the queen, tossing her head impatiently, and turning to Alice, she went on, "What's your name, child?" "My name is Alice, so please your majesty," said Alice very politely, but she added to herself, "Why, they're only a pack of cards after all. I needn't be afraid of them." "And who are these?" said the queen, pointing to the three gardeners who were lying round the rose tree, for you see, as they were lying on their faces, the patterns on their backs were the same as the rest of the pack. She could not tell whether they were gardeners, or soldiers, or courtiers, or three of her own children. "How should I know?" said Alice, surprised at her own courage. "It's no business of mine." The queen turned crimson with fury, and after glaring at her for a moment like a wild beast, screamed, "Off with her head, off!" "Nonsense," said Alice very loudly and decidedly, and the queen was silent. The king laid his hand upon her arm and timidly said, "Consider, my dear, she is only a child." The queen turned anger away from him and said to the knave, "Turn them over." The knave did so, very carefully with one foot. "Get up," said the queen in a shrill, loud voice, and the three gardeners instantly jumped up, began bowing to the king, the queen, the royal children, and everybody else. "Leave off that," screamed the queen. "You make me giddy." And then, turning to the rose tree, she went on, "What have you been doing here?" "May it please your majesty," said Two in a very humble tone, going down on one knee as he spoke, "we were trying—" "I see," said the queen, who had meanwhile been examining the roses. "Off with their heads," and the procession moved on. 3 of the soldiers remained behind to execute the unfortunate gardeners, who ran to Alice for protection. "You shouldn't be beheaded," said Alice. She put them into a large flower pot that stood near. The 3 soldiers wandered about for a minute or two, looking for them, and quietly marched off after the others. "Are their heads off?" shouted the queen. "Their heads are gone, if it pleases your majesty," the soldier shouted in reply. "That's right," shouted the queen. "Can you play croquet?" The soldiers were silent. They looked at Alice, as the question was evidently meant for her. "Yes," shouted Alice. "Come on then," roared the queen. And Alice joined the procession, wondering very much what would happen next. It's a very fine day," said a timid voice at her side. She walked by the rabbit, who was peeping anxiously into her face. "Very," said Alice. "Where's the Duchess?" "Hush, hush," said the rabbit in a low, hurried tone. He looked anxiously over his shoulder as he spoke, and then raised himself upon tiptoe, put his mouth close to his ear, and whispered, "She's under sentence of execution." What for?" said Alice. "Did you say what a pity?" the rabbit asked. "No, I didn't," said Alice. "I just don't think it's at all a pity. I said what for." She boxed the queen ears, the rabbit began. Alice gave a little scream of laughter. Oh, hush, the rabbit whispered in a frightened tone. The queen will hear you, see? She came rather late, and the queen said, Get to your places, shouted the queen in a voice of thunder. And people began running about in all directions, tumbling up against each other. However, they got settled down in a minute or two, and the game began. Alice thought she had never seen such a curious croquet ground in her life. It was all ridges and furrows. The balls were live hedgehogs, the mounts live flamingos, and the soldiers had to double themselves up to stand on their hands and feet to make the arches. The chief difficulty Alice found at first was in managing her flamingo. She succeeded in getting its body tucked away, comfortably enough under her arm, with its legs hanging down, but generally, just as she had got its neck nicely straightened out, and was going to give the hedgehog a blow with its head, it tossed itself round and looked up in her face with such a puzzled expression that she could not help bursting out laughing. And when she had got its head down and was going to begin again, it was very provoking to find that the hedgehog had unrolled itself. It was in the act of crawling away. Besides all this, there was generally a ridge or furrow in the way wherever she wanted to send the hedgehog to, and as the doubled-up soldiers were always getting up and walking off to other parts of the ground, Alice soon came to the conclusion that it was a very difficult game indeed. The players all played at once, without waiting for turns, quarreling all the while, and fighting for the hedgehogs. In a very short time, the queen was in a furious passion, and was stepping about and shouting, "Off with his head," or "Off with her head," about once in a minute. Alice began to feel very uneasy. To be sure, she had not as yet had any dispute with the queen, but she knew that it might happen any minute, and then, thought she, what would become of me? They're dreadfully fond of beheading people here. The great wonder is that there's anyone left alive. She's looking about for some ways of escape, and wondering whether she could get away without being seen, when she noticed a curious appearance in the air. It puzzled her very much at first, but after watching it a minute or two, she made it out to be a grin, and she said to herself, "It's a Cheshire cat. Now she'll have somebody to talk to." "How are you getting on?" said the cat, as soon as there was a mouth enough for it to speak with. Alice waited till the eyes appeared and then nodded. It's no use speaking about it, she thought, till its ears have come, or at least one of them. In another minute the whole head appeared. When Alice put down her flamingo, began an account of the game, feeling very glad she had someone to listen to her. The cat seemed to think that there was enough of it now in sight, and no more of it appeared. "I don't think they play all that fairly," Alice began in a rather complaining tone. "And they all quarrel so dreadfully. One can't hear oneself speak, and they don't seem to have any rules in particular. At least, if there are, nobody attends to them. And you've no idea how confusing it is. All the things being alive, for instance, there's the arc I've got to go through next walking about at the other end of the garden. And I should have croqueted the queen's hedgehog away just now, only it ran away when I saw mine coming." "How do you like the queen?" said the cat in a low voice. "Not at all," said Alice. "She's so extremely..." Just then she noticed that the queen was close behind her listening to this, so she went on, "Likely to win. That's hardly worth with that while finishing the game." The queen smiled and passed on. "Who are you talking to?" said the king, going up to Alice, looking at the cat's head with great curiosity. "It's a friend of mine, a Cheshire cat," said Alice. "Allow me to introduce it." "I don't like the look of it at all," said the king. "However, it may kiss my hand if it likes." "I'd rather not," the cat remarked. "Don't be impertinent," said the king, "and don't look at me like that." He got behind Alice as he spoke. "A cat may look at a king," said Alice. "I read that in some book, but I don't remember where." "Well, it must be removed," said the king very decidedly, and he called the queen, who was passing at the moment. "My dear, I wish you would have this cat removed." The queen had only one way of setting all his difficulties, great or small. "Off with his head," she said without even looking around. "I'll fix the executioner myself," said the king eagerly, and he hurried off. Alice thought that she might as well go back and see how the game was going on, as she had heard the queen's voice in the distance, screaming with passion. She had already heard her sentence 3 of the players to be executed for having missed their turns. They should not like the look of things at all, as the game was in such confusion that she never knew whether it was her turn or not, so she went in the search of her hedgehog. The hedgehog was engaged in a fight with another hedgehog, which seemed to Alice an excellent opportunity for croqueting one of them with the other. The only difficulty was that her flamingo was gone across the other side of the garden, where Alice could see it trying in a helpless sort of way to fly up into a tree. By the time she had caught the flamingo and brought it back, the fight was over, and both the hedgehogs were out of sight. But it doesn't matter much. thought Alice, as all the arches are gone from the side of the ground. So she tucked it away under her arm, that it might not escape again, and went back for a little more conversation with her friend. When she got back to the Cheshire Cat, she was surprised to find quite a large crowd collected around it. There was a dispute going on between the executioner, the king, and the queen, who were all talking at once, while the rest were quite silent and looked very uncomfortable. The moment Alice appeared, she was appealed by all three to settle the question, and they repeated their arguments to her, though as they all spoke at once, she found it very hard indeed to make out exactly what they said. The executioner's argument was that he couldn't cut off a head unless there was a body to cut it off from, that he had never had to do such a thing before, and he wasn't going to begin at his time of life. The king's argument was that anything that had a head could be beheaded, and that you weren't to talk nonsense. The queen's argument was that if something wasn't done about it in less, then no time should have everyone executed all around. It was this last remark that had made the whole party look so grave and anxious. Alice could think of nothing else to say, but "It belongs to the Duchess. You better ask her about it. She's in prison," the queen said to the executioner. "Fetch her here." And the executioner went off like an arrow. The cat's head began fading away the moment he was gone. By the time he had come back with the Duchess, it had entirely disappeared, so the king and the executioner ran wildly up and down looking for it, while the rest of the party went back to the game. Bum bum bum. And that is chapter 8. And we're done for the day. Yep, so let's just, I'll just try to chat a bit before I go, I guess. What? Okay, we're good. For some reason, I was just like, the screen glitched out on my live stream, so, on my side. So we're good. Yeah, so, what do you guys think of the story? For me, I'm just like, it's good. Yeah, as you can see, the Disney version is basically just abridged, essentially, of the actual story. Not a bad thing or anything, you know. Sometimes I cut stuff to make television, and for something that's not sensical as Alice in Wonderland, I think it's fine if they don't include everything. Yep. Let's see. Yeah. So the next stream will be the last stream of this reading stream of Alice in Wonderland, chapters 9 to 12. The titles of them are, let me go to that page. Okay, here. It is, I have a post-it notes, by the way, so just so I can check over where everything is. Chapter 9 is the Mogul Story. Chapter 10 is the Lobster Quadrille. Chapter 11 is Who Stole the Tarts, and chapter 12 is Alice's Evidence. Yep. And that'll be the end of this reading series of reading streams for Alice in Wonderland. Just 3. Yeah, and on that note, yeah, I'll probably stream here a little bit after more and talk a little bit more. Oh yeah. I did say this on my Twitter, but I think I said this on a previous stream as well. But the plushies I ordered, they're 3 plushies. I won't say what brand they are. They're a bit of a niche brand, I guess I'd say. In Korea, that's all I'll say, but slash Asia. But they're this hamster plushies I really like, and they got recently, so I ordered 3 of them, 1 of each color. Yep, my family did question my purchases because they did see that that the package is coming on the shared account that we have for buying stuff, because you know, it's just convenient that way. But I was just like, you know, it's my money. I will buy 3 hamsters if I want. I currently have 2 of them at my house, so I'll have 3 more different colors. But the 3 new colors I'll have is yellow, pink, and gray. Yeah. I really do like hamsters. I'm planning to own one after I'm done with schooling, at least, just so the only thing I have to worry about is, you know, streaming and my job, so yeah, because, you know, I want to give a lot of affection and cuteness to my hamster, so I used to own around 3 in the past. Yeah, 2 of them lived together. Let's just say it didn't end well, because me and my siblings didn't know that hamsters fight for territory. So one of them lived to the ripe old age of 2.5. Hamsters don't live long. And The other one did not live a long life. Yeah, I do regret it to this day. But after that, we learned to separate hamsters, but we got them. So, I guess lesson learned. Yeah. Let's see. Other than that, yeah, like I said, I am planning something for Valentine's Day. I'm not quite too sure how I'm gonna go about doing it, but yeah, I'm still experimenting with some stuff off stream. So yeah, it's reasons why tomorrow's stream for Hades, it'll probably be around 3-ish hours, 2 to 3 hours, I think. And then the drawing stream will be the same, around 2 to 3 hours. I did plan on drawing maybe a small fur coma, or either that or more fan art, I think, on Friday, but I'm not too sure. Either that or something else, I'm not too sure. Yeah, so I might gorilla stream public here on Saturday. I'm not too sure if I will though. Depends if I have time or not. Let's see, what are those things I have to do? Yeah. Next Monday, I might not stream in preparation for Valentine's Day on Tuesday, the 14th, but we'll see. If I do stream, it'll probably actually be a pretty short stream that day. That is scheduled for so far. Oh, and I got all my vaccinations done and stuff for school. So if my nose did sound a bit stuffy before I started stream, yeah. I'm still recovering from the vaccine shots. Yeah, I do actually get sick a bit under the weather for like a few days after I get vaccines. So yeah, I'm mostly better now though. I don't feel fatigued anymore, aka sore on my arms and my legs, but I still do have a bit of a stuffy nose sometimes. Yep. I thought it was my allergies, either or. I also have allergies too as well, because it's getting warmer these days, so the pollen is everywhere where I live. I do live in a place that has a lot of flowers. I guess that's all I'll say. And my parents really like growing flowers too, in the backyard and the front yard. So yeah. I mean, I like flowers too, I just don't like the pollen from them. Yeah, anyway, other than that, yeah, thanks everyone for coming. The next reading stream I don't think it'll be next week because of the special stream I have planned on Tuesday. And Wednesday I plan to do something else. So I think I'll be finishing up Project Cat, so yeah. Yeah, so thanks everyone for coming. I'm actually gonna end stream here now. And the next reading stream will probably be in 2 weeks, I'd say. Unless, I plan something else. Thanks everyone for coming, and goodbye. Bum bum ba dum bum bum ba dum bum bum bum. Bam.